Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. That's right, we're continuing on our October journey of horror films with Final Destination. Along with the Saw franchise, I consider Final Destination to be one of those horror film series that aren't technically amazing, but I consider them to be a guilty pleasure series of mine because it's just fun. Plus, I really like the premise. I remember the reason I saw this one was specifically because I was curious as to what turned my mom off to it. She's not a horror person. She legitimately went to see it because it predominantly features a single John Denver song over and over again, something that she couldn't say no to because she loved John Denver. Needless to say, she massively regretted her decision to see the movie and immediately made me curious to see it. Since then, I've seen this entire series a few times now, and my feelings on it are translucent. Let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, translucent, free from disguise or falseness. Final Destination tells the story of a young man who, after he has a vision of his plane exploding mid-flight, decides to get his friends off the plane. They think he's crazy at first, but immediately change their minds when they see the plane explode outside. That's when they all realize that he's had a premonition, but there's only one problem with that. Death is not done with them. It was their time to die, and Death now has a new design, as he's coming after them one by one. Can they cheat Death one more time? So, when it comes down to this film, the biggest thing that I've always loved is the overall premise, and how this is the king of red herrings films. It's definitely a gimmick film because one of the only reasons you watch any of these movies isn't so much for the characters, but rather to find out how death will knock on all these people's doors, what kind of freak accident is right around the corner. Any given film in this franchise is way over the top, silly, and improbable, but not 100% impossible. Freak accidents really do happen from time to time, and this capitalizes on what could potentially happen. One wrong misstep in life could create a chain reaction that could wind up killing you. Of course, these Final Destination movies basically make the claim that these freak accidents are supernatural in origin. Basically, it's just death using the natural resources available to him to kill the next person. I'll use one death in this film as an example. Sorry if this is a slight spoiler, you've been warned. We'll just say that there's a leaky faucet that pours just enough water out, which somebody slips on and lands on a spring wire that wraps around the person's neck and strangles them to death. That's an example, and there's a bunch of red herrings in the film too, which may actually be death coming for them. It might not be though. You can say what you want about red herrings, but it effectively creates paranoia so that the audience isn't ever certain what will happen next. Now, each of these movies have specific things that happen in each of them that differentiates them from the other films in the series, not just the death scenes. This first movie has the least of these differences because it didn't need them quite yet, but you can usually spot them in the specific design that death has. This one is the most basic out of any of them, and as such, it's the most simple and down to earth, even if it still is silly, and it is. Since it came out in the year 2000, you can bet a lot of what happens in the film is naturally corny, but I like it all the same. I would say that the biggest downfalls the film runs into is some of the casting. Given the fact that this series, as a whole, is very formulaic, you can probably guess that nobody's going to hold that much importance. They all kind of blend in together as Death's next victim, and little else. As such, it feels like they could cast anybody in these roles, and it would be the same movie. That'll probably be true for any of the films in the sequels. I specifically couldn't help but laugh at the casting in this movie because the main character was the only cast member I didn't recognize. Everybody else, the rest of the supporting roles, were all people I knew. Tony Todd, Ali Larter, Sean William Scott, etc. And they were all technically better actors than the main character. And maybe that's why I don't think I've seen him in anything else. Another thing, is the movie scary for this Interpreting the Scares event? No. Not really. I think it's more fun than anything. The scariest thing about the movie is how it suggests to the audience that we are constantly surrounded by things that can technically kill us under the right circumstance. And that actually is terrifying to think about. But let's talk about the final score for a second. I honestly think a lot of these movies will score similarly because they all operate basically the same way. From my recollection anyway. So it'll be interesting to look at my final rating when all is said and done. From an unbiased technical vantage point, I think the film was fair. There wasn't really anything specifically standing out as great. It had some pretty decent practical effects here and there, and obviously anytime they got certain chain reaction stuff, that's always fun. But cinematically, As a movie, it is rather bland. The technical score is 68%. As for the personal bias score, that's where this film excels. These movies have always been about being creative and fun, and that's mostly what the movie is. My bias score is 92%, averaging everything out to a final score of 80%, 80 out of 100 possible stars, or a B- letter grade. It's a fun movie, even if parts of it are a little bit aged. I've been meaning to watch this movie again for a very, very long time, and I hope to one day own the series as a whole. We'll see how the others hold up, though. Let me know your thoughts on this film in the comments section down below, and where you'd place it as a Final Destination flick. As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because there's always more like it coming out each and every single day. Hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified when I come up with my next Final Destination review. And until then, guys, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us. We